when the ulama became partners of governors, they started to justify corruption. They started to justify persecution. That's why they really destroyed their own credibility.
Ulama consider themselves the guardian of Islam. So, do you believe that they are actually the guardians of Islam, or they are actually the guardians of those illiberal content that exist in Islamic texts?
A student of madrasa can never be Ghazali because they are not given the opportunity to debate, discuss, engage with alternative ideas in that level.
According to Professor Ahmet Kuru, the Muslim world is defined, characterized, marked by authoritarianism and underdevelopment. And by looking at the situation as it persists now in Muslim majority countries, one could feel two things. Most of the conflicts that exist in the world are waged in Muslim majority countries. They are waged on Muslims. Secondly, Muslims are increasingly becoming incapable of defending themselves. Muslims are subservient, they are dependent. And a question that definitely arises in everyone's mind is how? How Muslim came to enjoy this status of authoritarianism, this status of underdevelopment, and this status of subservience. This is the question that is probed in this conversation with Professor Ahmed Kuru, who had authored a book on this topic of Islam, authoritarianism, and underdevelopment. I just came to know that you were about to visit Pakistan to ThinkFest, which then didn't materialize.
Thanks, Maz, for this conversation. Yes, Pakistan is one of the most important countries for both my work and my personal life. You know, I was born in Turkey, therefore, we Turks and Pakistanis are always close. And then after the publication of my recent book, Islam, Authoritarianism, and Underdevelopment, there were many countries engaging with the book. But Indonesia was, of course, very crucial because they translated the book and they taught me that it's seventh printing. But in addition to Indonesia, I would say Pakistan may be one of the most engaging countries. People like you having interviews. I have personal friends in Down newspaper, in June, and in Urdu. Nawal Waqt, many newspaper in Pakistan reviewed the book. Senior people presented the book. So I was looking forward to visit Pakistan. But let me make the long story short. I first went to Malaysia, and two cabinet ministers, government members, were supposed to launch the book. And the opposition party there, an Islamist party, use it as an opportunity to attack the government. And then they say, look, it's a critical book and government should not promote this book. Then it gets nasty because there were several groups there. Some of them are wonderful people. Some of them are religious fanatics. And at the end, the police tried to seize my passport in the KLA airport. That's why I had to cut my visit short. And in Pakistan, I couldn't extend for various concerns of my friends there. That's why it's kind of canceled. But I'm still looking forward to one day, inshallah, I will visit Pakistan. Especially, I visit countries after my book translated and published, like Morocco, Arabic, Bosnia, Bosnian, Belgium, France, French, Netherlands, Germany, etc. And in Urdu, it just translated 6-7 months ago.
Yeah.
Therefore, yeah, when I was planning to visit, there was no Urdu translation of my book. Now it is. Mashal Books publish Urdu translation. So maybe next year I'll come to discuss the book in English. Of course, I can speak Urdu, but the readers can do both now.
Yeah, and I will personally look forward to it, and I will do look forward to an opportunity to see you in person as well.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, like you said, that government was not allowing to promote your book. I think for that reason, people like me are here to promote the book, because I think it is of extreme significance, and the ideas that you have put forth in your book are like very radical, I should say, very critical, and they are so consumable. Like the book is very readable. So I think for that reason they may see the significance of it, and for that reason they have taken that stand against the book. I was wondering, while I was reading your book, I had this impression that as far as you are concerned, Islam is a very flexible religion, and if we could see the situation as it persists now, one could say that it is a very fragile religion as well. Like if certain Islamists or certain people could use it in the way they want in order to justify what you call the Ulama-State alliance, don't you think that it's also a sort of criticism of religion as well, like that it cannot defend itself against this misuse?
Complex question. Initially, thanks for your kind words about the book. And in addition to having a non-academic style, it's an
Mhm.
academic book, but non-academics can also read. Another thing makes the book interesting for some people and disturbing for some Islamists in Malaysia and some other cases like Somalia is that it's written from a Muslim perspective. I'm a Muslim. I don't have to tell this, but it is public that I went to Hajj
Yes.
last year. I wrote in multiple languages my experience, even it was translated, I think, in Urdu. So, and this makes some radicals more concerned because if the book had been written from a secularist perspective by someone like Bernard Lewis, critical of Islam, then it would have been much easier to sideline and put aside.
Yeah.
Whereas I bring my cases from examples of Muslim history and from the approach I learned from my family, friends, and schools in Turkey, which is basically a Hanafi tradition. And then linking this to your question, isn't it a critique of Islam? No, it is not, because it depends how you understand Islam. Islam as a religion revealed to Prophet ﷺ from God and set of sources, primarily Quran, is and has been always open to interpretation because the Quran itself says some verses are mutashabi, metaphorical, some verses are muhkam. They are taken literally, and only those who have deep knowledge understand the difference and what
Mhm.
they are. We are not like fundamentalist Christians who take Bible literally and refuse any metaphorical interpretation. And the Ulama-State alliance critique in the book is not a critique of the ulama because the book appreciates Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal, Imam Buhari, and others. How they always refuse to receive state money. They always refuse to obey. When the governor of Buhara asked great hadith scholar Buhari, come to teach my child, Buhari says, I cannot serve you as such. You can send your child to my circle, halakha, if he really wants ilm, the science of hadith. Then the governor was angry. He put Buhari into exile in a village where the great scholar died. So this is the tradition. This is the source. So my first book, Secularism book, was a comparison of United States, France, and Turkey. And it was promoting secularism as a universal value, saying that the Turkish secularism 10, 15 years ago was too much assertive, French type, almost anti-religious on certain policies like banning headscarf. So I was criticizing exclusion of Islam from the Turkish public sphere by secularists. I call them assertive secularists, French type. That book was a more universal social scientific comparing Western countries and Turkey. But the new book, Islam book, is not promoting religion state separation from a Western contemporary point of view. No, it's promoting religion state separation from historical Islamic sources especially from 8th and 12th centuries. And scholars like Abu Hanifa, Ghazali, and others, how they say that a good scholar should put a distance between himself and the ruler, because rulers are generally corrupt and despotic.
Yeah. So one of the, I think these historical arguments are far more radical, because I now had this idea that there are a lot of ideas that we have with ourselves, and we hold these ideas very dear to us in the name of Islam. But if you look at these ideas from a bit historical perspectives, they are from other cultures, and they are with us because these ideas justify the ruling establishment. For example, you say in your book that the political thought that are dominant in these Islamic or Muslim discourses, they are actually from Iranian sources, and they are not Islamic in the very first place.
This is a thank you for asking. So I gave many interviews, but I don't remember someone asking this before. And it's important because Muslims today take certain things Islamic, but in fact they are secular maxims, ideas, cliches, sayings. For example, the book repeatedly analyzed a fabricated hadith saying that religion and state are twins, religion is the foundation, state is the guardian,
Yeah.
that without foundation collapse, that without guardians perishes. It is a saying of King Ardashir of the 3rd century Sasani Empire, a will to his son and advice to him understanding religion and state togetherness. After the 11th century, when the old distance between ulama and state collapsed and new emerging alliance between ulama and state began after the 11th century, the ulama and the state need a justification, so they fabricated this hadith. But beyond this religion-state brotherhood, there are other things. For example, the Persian, the cultural entity, Iran, geography, and Sasani is the empire, like Roman Empire. And this Sasani thought was very well developed. And today we see its influence in religion-state brotherhood, but also social segmentation and stratification, that the king and the ulama at the top, the soldiers, the industrial people, farmers, second class, then the merchants are the bottom. Because it was a society of agricultural production, religious rule, monarchy, and trade was important, but traders generally taking dangerous. Same in many Muslim countries like the Ottoman Empire. Merchants never gave the chance to have any social role, use money for socio-political change. But the early Muslim society was sharply different, starting with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was a merchant. Then the founders of Umayyad family was merchant family. Then most ulama, Abu Hanifa was a silk merchant, Ahmed bin Hanbal worked in textile factory. They were private, funded people, mostly by commerce. And these merchants supported both ulama and polymaths like Ibn Sina and others. In addition to some state patronage, these polymaths also received commercial support. That was Muslim society at that time. But then things change.
Yeah. So
remind me your sorry. And then let me conclude by that. So the idea that merchants should be taken lower class, also another Sasani thought. So then you may ask, why did this Sasani thought became so important on religion-state brotherhood, on merchants should not be appreciated? How come the Muslim society with religious state separation, merchants key role 8th to 11th century transform after the 11th century? So I am not blaming Iran for that. I am saying that there were multiple economic, social, religious, geopolitical transformations explained in the book
Yeah.
that gave the Ulama-State alliance. And when these class relations change, they look for justification. They couldn't find the justification in Islam or Arab cultural legacy. They find the justification in Iranian Sasani legacy. That's why they pick up these statements. Even Ibn Khaldun in Muqaddimah, the great Arab historian of the 14th century, he said, the Islamic tradition of the ruler get loyalty of the subject is bay'ah.
Yeah.
And bay'ah in Arabic is a financial transaction. I sell something to you and we shake hands. That's why Prophet ﷺ shook hands with men and women to take their bay'ah, that not a financial, but it is a religious transaction. We accept you as the messenger of God.
Yeah.
And the Rashidun Khalifa also get bay'ah. But Ibn Khaldun says we should follow the Sasani Iranian tradition, where the subject come with respect, kiss the earth, kiss the knees, kiss the hand of the king. Never shake hand, because kings are so important that it will be disgraceful for an ordinary man to touch his hand. So I'm not criticizing Ibn Khaldun here. I'm just saying that Muslim somehow says the Prophet tradition was too pure. We have to take more realistic Iranian understanding of politics. This is the real monarchical power. Today in the 21st century, I am saying, which one you'd like to?
Yes.
Do you want the medieval, Iranian, hierarchical, we ordinary people are subject of some super people, monarchs, awliya, ulama, and then we regard them as better than us, higher than us, supreme? Or the Prophet's humble way of ruling, shaking hand and never saying that some elite is superior to the masses?
Yes, I think you had said you had quoted an author on this point of equality, that due to this the transformation, those ideals of equality and egalitarianism were also then compromised. And what you said now just validated that point, that in the earlier faith of Islam there were these ideals of equality, but then because of these influences, those were compromised. And don't you think that one consequence of this ulama-state alliance is that religious authority has also became a sort of rent? So, for example, the state would say to a particular person that you can be called, let's say, Grand Mufti of Pakistan, and in that, like, in response to that, you will support the state in whatever situation it is. And I'm asking this because there are a lot of Muslim scholars who are engaged in businesses in Pakistan, for example, and they are very wealthy, yet they won't say anything meaningful about people or anything meaningful against the practices of the state, because state has given them that authority. So don't you think like this religious authority has also become a sort of rent that states distributes as a consequence of this ulama state alliance?
No, exactly. And in many countries, uh, like Egypt, you gave the example of Pakistan, and similar in Egypt, there is the Grand Mufti office. There are books written about how the military regime in Egypt, when they staged the coup d'etat in 2013, they got support from Al-Assad and the Grand Mufti. Grand Mufti even gave the permission for the army to shoot the protesters.
Yes.
Is this the job of an alim? Is this the job of a religious authority? No. Their job is to promote Islamic ahlak, ahlak ethics, the principles. The sacred value of Islam is an ethical life where we don't commit sins or hurt other people. But when the ulama became partners of governors, they started to justify corruption. They started to justify persecution. That's why they really destroyed their own credibility.
Yeah, and I think it raises something point. I think like about the very nature of these. I would like to call it religious establishment, because one of the point that you make in your book is that like from the day they have made that position in public life, they have actually contributed to stagnation in Muslim intellectual life. And do you like we have this idea in Pakistan and everywhere else as well? Perhaps ulama consider themselves the guardian of Islam. So you believe that they are actually the guardians of Islam, or they are actually the guardians of those illiberal content that exist in Islamic texts? So
So again,
what they guard?
yeah, it depends on. Thank you. It depends on what kind of ulama. Of course, we are not supposed to generalize a large
Yeah.
number of people from history to present. There were ulama, as I said, very independent. Then things change, and even today there are some ulama critical of corruption, etc. So we don't put all of them in the same basket.
Mm-hmm.
But the general trend
Yes.
before the 11th century, 90% of ulama were privately funded.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 90% are publicly funded. In Turkey, Diyanet, in Egypt, the Grand Mufti Office, in Pakistan, Sharia courts, in Iran, they control the entire state body.
Yes.
So, the point you're asking about intellectual dynamism is crucial because, first of all, no one gave them the authority to be the guardian in Sunni Islam. Because
Okay.
in Sunni Islam, after Prophet ﷺ died, no one had a secret message or divine designation. It was Shia who accept that after the Prophet still, Ali, Hassan, Hussein, radiallahu anhum, they were designated by God. So the Sunni never believed that. But even for Shia, after 7 and 12 imams, no more imams.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, today ulama, they should not represent themselves like innocent imams, prophets-like people designated by God. No, their position is a very general terms, represents science of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
When there are hadiths about ulama, it's not about a class of clergy.
Okay.
It's about people of wisdom. Anyone can be like that after reading books and sciences. There
Mm-hmm.
is no boundary of being in or out ulama because we are not like the Catholic Church.
Okay.
In the Catholic Church, it's clearly defined who is clergy, who is not. In Islam, especially Sunni Islam, there's no such boundary. Anyone can be alim with scholarship, and any member of ulama, if they are not really knowledgeable, they are not alim in the
Mm-hmm.
Islamic sense. But there's one thing, the guardianship. So we are not the children that need to be protected by them. Everyone is free Muslim. Second, the guardianship of the tradition. This is also a very wrong idea because Islam has both some core values, faith principles, which are universal and don't change by time. And also, there are so many details in fiqh, Islamic law, which are and which should be changed by time.
Okay.
When the ulama say we conserve, what are you conserving? Why are you conserving all the details? In Saudi Arabia, they were saying that women cannot go to Hajj alone. Now they say women can go Hajj alone. Which one is Islamic?
Yes.
And if you agree that time change, is it 2020? Why did you wait until 2020?
Yes.
These are the questions they should answer.
And these are the questions that we don't ask, I think, here in Pakistan as well. Like even if I say that this idea is to a certain extent acceptable, that Islam wants you to be engaged in politics, but then you need to engage in some meaningful for politics, and not just a politics that would justify those oppressive and exploitative nature of the rentier state, as you call it. One, and now when you just said that everyone can become alim or religious authority, I had a conversation with the Professor Arsalan Khan. He had authored a book on Jamaati Islami, and he said that this idea that everyone can actually become a religious authority, it actually came with colonialism, in at least in the context of South Asia. This idea was in Islam. We were not debating this point, but it became like too widespread, because of the influence of colonialism. Before that, we had this genealogical authority in Islam where a person would say, let's say, I am a peer, then my son would be a peer, and then next his son would be a peer, and this would continue.
So first of all, I don't know the person you referred to, but in general, there's a very cheap way of explaining everything with colonialism.
Yeah.
Colonialism was bad. We are happy that it ended most of the world. And then hopefully in Gaza and other parts of the
Yes.
Muslim societies, it will end. But keep blaming it, make Muslims lazy and unable to change their own life. In Pakistan, colonialism ended 75 years ago.
Yes.
In Turkey, it ended a century ago.
Yes.
Can Turks state blame? And in fact, Turks never directly colonized, but Istanbul was occupied by French and British. Should we still blame them for our own inability to change things, do things? Because the Quran says, وَلَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانَ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. The effort you put with your hands. Where is your agency? So if colonialists bring this idea, why did Muslims accept immediately? And why can't just drop the idea now? Why don't the person who think that Muslims should not say anyone can be alim show us how bad this idea is, and we will drop it?
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in Malaysia, they were telling me and trying to convince in a conference that the Sharia imposed on us by British colonialism. And most of the people who say that, they like Sharia. I said, don't you see the contradiction? You talk about decolonization in Malaysia, then you say Britain brought Sharia. Then drop Sharia if it is bad colonial thing. So they didn't even see the contradiction of the two arguments.
Yeah.
So regarding this issue, I understand the concern that if anyone can say, I can be the authority, then we have people like Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. Then there is no genealogy. Anyone can have authority, and radical terrorist groups can emerge. But I'm not saying that anyone can say I am the authority, because I'm saying no one is authority.
Okay.
There is no authority. Everyone has an approach. That's why we have four mazhab in Sunni Islam. Everyone has an explanation on many issues in the Hanafi tradition. When Abu Hanifa says something, Imam Yusuf and Imam Muhammad disagree. Even on the time of Adhan, Asr prayer in Turkey, we follow Imam Yusuf and Imam Muhammad. We don't follow Abu Hanifa in the Hanafi Adhan time. So imagine Imam Yusuf and Muhammad says, oh, Abu Hanifa is an authority, we cannot criticize him. Then how would the mazhab evolve, transform, new ideas emerge? So therefore, first of all, the authority is the Prophet and the Quran, and then interpretations are open. What I am saying is that if someone study, then the person can have their own understanding of Islam, and no one can really deny it. It's against freedom.
I had a conversation with Peter Adamson, and I think I had mentioned him to you as well. And he does not believe in this idea that there is like any sort of decline intellectually, specifically in Muslim. He believes that there was a time when Western Europe was learning from Islam, from those Muslim lands and Muslims. When they stopped learning from Muslim, they said that, see, there is now this decline. So his point was like that philosophy actually continues and it is like evolving. So that, and he said like if anyone has this idea, he should immediately drop it. That there is like any kind of decline in that sense of the word.
So basically, first of all, the people who said there was decline is not the Western people. Again, Peter Adamson and the person in your previous question, they are all wrong. To assume that any idea we have coming from colonizers, West, they said, no, this is an authentic Muslim idea.
Okay.
I documented in my book that the idea that there is intellectual decline in the Muslim world began with at least Ibn Khaldun.
Okay.
In the Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun says the Persians, the last great Persian scholar is Tusi. Since the time of, and then there are no more scholar in Iranian Persians who produced great scholars previous centuries. We are hearing, he said, in Central Asia, there are great scholars, but only Taftazani, which is a tafsir and kalam scholar, not a philosopher or nature science scholar. And he said there's a decline in the Muslim world intellectually. 200 years later, Katib Çelebi, Haji Halife, the greatest intellectual of the Ottoman Empire, he wrote multi-volume biography called Keşf-i Zünun, where he said that we have a scientific decline. The reason was that during the 16th century and early 17th century, in madrasas, they exclude science and philosophy and focus on Islamic science in a narrow, rigid way that make us intellectually decline. So the Ottomans in the 18th century, and especially 19th century, everybody agreed that Muslim world has an intellectual decline. You couldn't find any sensible Ottomans who would reject, because look, the numbers is obvious. The Muslim world from 8th and 12th century had libraries in Baghdad, Cairo, Qurtuba, with hundreds of thousands of books. According to one report, the library in Cairo had 2 million books. At that time, the largest library was in Paris with 600 books. No European library had even 1,000 books. From that point, we reached to the point that Muslim didn't get printing press for 300 years.
Yes.
In the 18th century, when they get the printing press, they only printed 50,000 books. The same century, Europeans published 1 billion books. So any reasonable person make comparisons, see how great Muslims were, then how backward they became. And then 600 years of Ottoman Empire. They didn't produce any scholar at the caliber of Ibn Sina,
Yes.
Farabi, Ghazali. I only say Katib Çelebi, and he cannot be comparable with these great minds. So let me briefly summarize very simply. We have to ask 3 questions. First, is the Muslim world, 50 Muslim majority countries, are having good scores of science and education today, Nobel Prize winners, etc.? No. So no one can deny that we have a bad situation today. Then, did we have similarly bad situation from 8th to 12th centuries? No, no one can say that, because everybody agreed that Muslims had a golden age. They produced cutting-edge philosophers. Mathematics they taught to Europeans. At the time when Europe had no philosophers, Muslim world was full of philosophers. Then, between these two, today and the golden era, we have the Ottoman time. And I'm telling you, 600 years, Ottomans could not produce a major philosopher. For 300 years, they didn't get printing press. For 200 years, they didn't write a single book on America. A new continent discovered, and no books Ottomans produce on that. And Ottomans for 600 years should be better than early Muslims 600 years, because they had now European challenges. Europeans are producing science. Ottomans can learn from them, etc. So they had many advantages than the time of Ibn Sina, Farabi, but they couldn't use it because of the Ulama-State alliance, because of the intellectual stagnation. So now, after all this data, they are answering my question, saying that, oh, during the Ottoman era, there are great scholarship, but we couldn't find out the manuscript yet. One day, in 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, we will find out.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, this idea of we will find out one day can be used for anything. This is not a scientific way of proving or disproving something. How can I know that you'll find out something in a century? Yes. It's a very silly idea.
Yes.
Second, I grew up in Turkey. Even today, we know that Turks are literacy rate is low. book writing is low, book reading is low, and it has a historical. You
Yes.
say genealogy. There is a genealogy that come from Ottoman problem. That's why
Yes.
Turks are not very much intellectual society today.
Yes.
And then the final issue is that when Muslims defend their positions, they are referring to scholars like Peter Adamson. They are coming to me and saying, look, there is a British scholar saying that. There's a Harvard professor saying that. And I'm telling them, why don't you write a book as a
Yes.
Muslim, local, Arab,
Yes.
Persian?
Yes. Yes.
Why are you bringing me this example from Western people? You
Yes.
cannot even write this. It
Yes.
shows how low the scholarship in Muslim countries.
Yes. Let's say we cannot produce those intellectuals, those scientists, because we underappreciated those non-religious sciences. Why we could not produce any sophisticated theologians? Let's say in political thought. If I ask, let's say, Grand Mufti of Pakistan, Mufti Taqi Usmani, is dictatorship a legitimate form of government? I don't think he would have anything to say categorical about this point.
No, that's a great point. And let me link it to the previous question. First of all, we cannot see even a great Islamic scholar at the caliber of Ghazali and Razi. Adamson wrote a book on Razi. Can he find a scholar as good as Razi today, or 18th century Ottoman Empire, or 17th century? No, because Razi and Ghazali were the product of Muslim Golden Age. That's why we keep referring to Ghazali.
Yes.
I read Ihya Ulumuddin. I like it because it's a so systematic book. Some people say that he learned the systematic work from some medical books of the Greek philosophers, etc. But at the time, there was a very open-ended debate which made him flourish as a scholar under
Mm-hmm.
these circumstances. But
Mm-hmm.
today's circumstances, a student of madrasa can never be Ghazali because they are not given the opportunity to debate, discuss, engage with alternative ideas in that level. And of course, I'm not blaming Ghazali in my book because the book is a combination of ideas and material factors, agency and structure. There were multiple transformations. That's Ulama-State alliance as a class structure and power structure emerge. And this alliance pick up Ghazali's certain ideas and use him. But there are other ideas of Ghazali. For example, he regret that he ever
Yes.
taught in state-run madrasas. They could have focused on that part, but they didn't. They
Yes.
choose the parts that help them to establish their authority and punish the dissent.
Yes. And this is my last point. This is my last question. What would a progressive relationship between religion and state look like? Like we have these rentier economies, rentier states, and which is like, as a consequence, rentier religion, we should say. So,
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I really believe in the idea of separation on all spheres, including state, corporations, academia, and then religious institutions and clergy.
mhm,
I was in India 2 months ago. And then during my talk, I gave the example of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Then an Indian newspaper made this headline of the page saying that what is Elon Musk and Donald Trump had to do with ulama and state? Because I told them that, look, the separation not only need between ulama and state, but also between corporations and the government,
mhm,
universities and the government. And now in my country, United States, we have a big crisis because the new administration does not accept the principle of separation.
yes,
So once you destroy the principle of separation, you produce corruption, inefficiency, corruption in academia, corruption in religion, corruption in economy. Government is a violent institution. Academics, ulama, corporate peoples try to have a principled distance with this violent institution. If we be part of it, then we become part of a political game, and religious ahlak ethics will be forgotten.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is the case today. Specifically, I can talk in the context of Pakistan. So thank you so much, sir. I waited for this, and I'm so glad for your time. I learned a lot from your book, and I'm planning to give something to the people, to Pakhtuns in Pashto language as well from the book. So thank you so much for your time, for your ideas, and yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you.